Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today is Thursday, May 13th, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Respond to a Sources Sought Notice and Requests for Information, RFI. My name is Shonda Harris, and I'm a Business Opportunity Specialist with the Columbus District Small Business Administration, the SBA. I work with companies that are in the 8A program that get contracts, and also those that may be interested in the SBA small business programs. We have a wonderful webinar planned for you today. We are always excited. This webinar is being brought to you as a result of a wonderful partnership between the Small Business Administration and the PTAC, the Ohio University PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Center. So we don't take for granted some of you that are joining us today. I saw some new faces and new names on today's webinar. You may be new to federal government contracting. You may be new to joining us for these webinars. Today's webinar is a part of a monthly series. Every month we do a government contracting related webinar, a different topic. So today's webinar actually is a part of a series. Last month we focused on capture management, how to prepare and look for different opportunities. And so this month's training series is focused on how to actually respond to different type of notifications, so that in order for you to go after and win a contract. So we are excited about today. Couple housekeeping items during the presentation. If you do have a question, we ask that you type it in the chat. We will try to answer that as we go along. And then also at the end, we also have a Q&A session. I will say this, sometimes people do have to leave. Again, this is a 3-part series. Today is the beginning of that series. If you can join us next week, next week's webinar, May 20th, will focus on how to respond to a RFP, request for proposal, or an RFQ, request for quote. So we recognize, again, some of you may be new to government contracting. So we do provide information to help make you or help prepare you to be government contracting ready. And that is a good segue into introducing our guest for today. Today's presenter is Bill Cox. He is the Dayton PTAC manager, I believe, and he has been with the PTAC for maybe over 8 years, 10 years. And so Bill, before you get started, if you can give us an introduction to all the wonderful services that the PTAC provides, so that if somebody's interested today, they can become a PTAC client if they are not. So without further ado, Bill, you can go ahead and take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Shonda, and thank you for the introduction. Hopefully everybody is seeing the title slide on your screen. Every presentation has at least one glitch, and let's get mine out of the way right up front. You see my phone number that's listed there. I think the last 4 digits should be 9883, not 9983. So I will make that as a correction and get that on the final slide.
No.
Please mute
If you can mute your mics also, please mute your mics.
Saying that everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Now the PTAC is actually a national program. It's primarily funded by the federal government, by the Defense Logistics Agency, and then they award cooperative grants agreements to various hosts in the states. And then within the hosts of the states, they can award sub-grant agreements. In the state of Ohio, the state of Ohio has received a grant from the Defense Logistics Agency to run the PTAC program in the state of Ohio. The state in turn has awarded sub-grant agreements, number one to Rhodes State College, and they handle the northwest corner of the state, Lima and kind of north from there, and then to the west to include Toledo. Youngstown State runs 3 counties to include the city of Youngstown and assists clients there. And Ohio University runs the majority of the counties in Ohio as far as assisting businesses. And we have personnel in Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, Pickerington, Akron, and then we have 2 in the Cleveland area. And then, of course, our program manager, Sharon Hopkins, is over in Athens, and she has several counties that she is responsible for in that area. And that's what's called the statewide PTAC network in Ohio. Now, DLA also has a regional concept for PTACs, and there is one regional PTAC in Ohio that's called down in Portsmouth, called South Point, and they go direct to DLA for their grant. So at 100,000 foot level, that kind of gives you an idea about how we're organized. Now, the mission of the PTAC is to advise and train businesses on how to win government contracts at the federal, state, and local level. We don't win the contracts for you. We don't submit your proposal. We don't write your proposal. But our job is to teach you how to do it. And we do that in a couple different ways. Number one, we will meet with clients individually and provide them training and guidance and suggestions. And then number two, we will offer seminars like this one on a subject that is common to the acquisition process in the government that many clients could benefit from increasing their knowledge of. We refer to the businesses we work with as our clients, and accordingly, in order to remain active with us, a client has to either accumulate 30 minutes of counseling time over a 1-year period or attend one of our training events. And counseling time can be a variety of ways. When we were in our offices, we would meet with clients in person. We could receive a telephone call from you with a question on a particular topic, and we could discuss it. You could send us an email. And then any time that we spend doing research on your behalf counts toward the 30-minute requirement. So that's how you remain an active PTAC client. Some of the services we provide, we will help you we will advise you on how to put together your capability statement. We will have trainings, and there's one coming up on how to respond to an actual government request for proposal. We had an excellent seminar in the last week or so that the SBA sponsored on what's called capture management, which is kind of the step after you respond to a sources sought notice before the RFQ comes out. And the SBA was fortunate to get an excellent speaker to come in and do that, Teresa Macaluloy, who is a business owner and also in the past a very experienced capture manager. So we will provide those trainings to you. We will also offer you what's called a bid match service. And once you define, especially for federal acquisition, what's known as your North American Industrial Classification System codes and any associated product service or federal supply codes, we will create a profile for your business, and then it will go out with your profile almost on a daily basis and search various procurement websites for items that match your profile. And then you'll be sent an email once a day with links to opportunities that match your profile. And they could be in all various stages of the procurement process, from at the very beginning when the government issues a sources sought notice to the actual publication of the award notice. So with that, that's probably a little more information that you wanted to know about the PTAC. But if you are an Ohio business and said, you know, I think this PTAC could probably help me with government business and learning how to do this, go to the website ptac.ohio.org. I'm sorry, ptac.ohio.edu, and register as a new client on our website, and there'll be a tab for new client registration. Fill it in online, check the box that you want services, and hit the submit button. This will begin the process of generating your client record, and the client that's responsible for the county where your business is located will be in contact with you to schedule you for an appointment. If you are out of the state of Ohio, if your business is not in Ohio and you have no presence in Ohio, go to our National Association website, the Association of Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, aptac.org. And there you'll bring up the website, and on the home page you'll see a map of the United States, and you can click on your state, and it will bring you down a new web screen that will show you all the PTAC offices located in your state, and you can contact the one that's closest to you and begin the process of them supporting you. So that kind of gives you a little bit of information about us. And now if we're ready, why don't we go ahead and start diving into today's topic about how to respond to a sources sought notice. And I am going to turn off my camera so that I don't use up too much bandwidth, which is a habit that I have. But I've got to be able to do this. Well, I'm going to go on. We'll be brave today. So here's today's agenda. We're going to talk a little bit first about what's a request for information and differentiate them between that and a sources sought notice. Then the remainder of the presentation we're going to spend on the sources sought notice. We're going to talk about a simple example that's currently live out there in Beta SAM. And we're going to talk about what about if it had been a different sources sought notice that was a little more complex. We're going to talk about what you submit and how. We're going to talk about fighting for feedback from the government. We're going to talk briefly about what does the government do with your submission. And then I've got an obligatory summary to get me off the stage. And then answer your questions. So, what is this request for information? Well, it's simply what it says. The government is looking for some information and knowledge. In my former life, before I began working for PTAC, I actually worked in the defense industry. And then before that, I spent 26 years in the Air Force. About the last 15 or so years of that was as a program manager and program director for large acquisitions in the Department of Defense and the Air Force. So myself and the teams that would usually work for me, we would receive sources sought responses, or we would receive the response from an RFI. And as far as an RFI, believe it or not, the government is not the source of all knowledge. In many cases, industry has better knowledge about a particular topic or technology, or in this case, maybe a new material or a new process or new ideas than the government has. You know, sometimes the government will say, you know, we've been doing, I'll just pick a concept. We've been doing the air defense of the continental United States for the same way for the last 40, 50, 60 years. Is there a different and better way to do it today, given the technology that exists today that didn't exist way back when we set up all these fighter aircraft on alert with you know, using radars, etc.? Is there a better way to do it now in the year 2021? So they could put out a request for information to industry via Beta SAM, saying, you know, tell us about your ideas about how we could do air defense of the continental United States better. A request for information is usually not tied to an immediate solicitation, but it can give you a hint about, the government is asking for an RFI about this topic. They may be thinking about something down the road. The response to the government is typically free form on your part. Normally, they will ask for a white paper, but there will be no compensation for providing the white paper to the government with your thoughts. Now, you're sitting there going, well, they ain't going to pay me for this. Why should I bother responding? Well, especially if you are new to government business, this gives you an opportunity to impress them and to get your name out there of your company as a new player, somebody who has some knowledge maybe that other competitors don't. Maybe you have some better ideas, whatever. Submission of an interesting response to the government could request that they ask you to come in and meet with them. And those opportunities are golden, because that gives you an opportunity to meet the key government personnel that are involved in whatever they are researching, and you can learn more about their concerns or what's driving this and where it could potentially lead in the future. And you begin to position your company for future work. Maybe it's not on this particular topic, but maybe if you impress them, they will see you as a credible source in this area. So this is a way for you to make a positive impression upon the government. Now we're going to talk about, now from here on out, we're going to talk about a sources sought response. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch screens. So I'm going to stop sharing. Hey, it worked. And then I am going to pull up a sources sought notice that I've been looking at that we're going to use in this presentation. And then I'm going to see if I can share my screen again. Hopefully now you can see a page out of betasam.gov. It just so happens, as I was getting ready for this presentation and I was doing some research, I found an actual sources sought notice for the recompete for some landscaping services in Dayton, Ohio. And as you can see, this is being managed by the General Services Administration, the Public Building Service, part of the General Services Administration. You can see that it is a sources sought notice. And it was published on May 4th. The response date is like in 5 days at 2 p.m. Now notice they didn't say close of business. So when they say 2 p.m., if at all possible, you should make 2 p.m. Not 2:45, not 2:15, not 5 after 2, but 2 p.m. Now, if you don't make it, you can always call the contracting officer and say, I realize I've missed the deadline, but can I submit a response? I just saw the notice, whatever, etc. And typically they'll at this stage they'll be pretty generous with you. It depends on the contracting officer, depends on how many responses they've already gotten, etc. Now this tells you that the NAICS code that the work is going to be performed under. The place of performance is Dayton, Ohio. So it's actually local. So then you can read the description. They're telling you up front, this is not a solicitation. So there will be no contract awarded from this announcement. They're doing market research. And that a subsequent solicitation may follow. There doesn't have to be a solicitation after a sources sought announcement. Sometimes programs get canceled for a variety of reasons. They could lose their funding to something else. The government decides maybe we will take some of our own people and do the landscaping services, what have you. But here it's telling you they want landscaping and related services at the following locations. And it's the federal courthouse, federal building and U.S. courthouse in Dayton, the associated parking lot at 3rd and Perry Street, and then the National Archives and Records Center down in Moraine, Ohio, which is a suburb of Dayton. Then it gives you a little bit about the scope. Then the next paragraph is really important. It tells you what you have to do to respond. Sometimes these are more detailed than others. depending upon what they're seeking. Sometimes they may tell you, we want no more than a 10-page response. And we'd like you to address the following questions, and they'll give you a list of questions. But however they want you to respond and what they want you to respond with will either be in this section or it will be in an attached document. So it says you've got to email Jenna Garcia at gsa.gov, and you should provide the following: company name, address, point of contact, phone number, email address, DUNS number, and a capability statement. Also, they want 3 customer references where you've provided similar services. If you can't provide 3 customer references, unless you're going to subcontract out some of this work, and maybe your subcontract, maybe you only have 2, and you have a subcontractor that's going to maybe handle Moraine, the NARA warehouse, that would be 3. But guess what? If you don't have 3 customer references, I can just about guarantee you $1 to a bag of donuts that if a solicitation comes out, they're going to want 3 customer references. And unless you're going to add some customers between now and then, when the solicitation comes out and that requirement's in there and you don't have it, you won't be competitive. Matter of fact, you'll be thrown out of the competition as non-compliant. And then they also want you to answer the following questions. If your business is large and small, are you disadvantaged? If you're disadvantaged, which group are you disadvantaged, do you qualify for? And if your firm is certified in the 8A procurement program of the Small Business Act, are you certified as HubZone? And are you a woman-owned operated business, or are you a certified service disabled veteran-owned or veteran-owned small business? And these are all particular certifications that you can obtain that the PTAC will help you and work with you to make sure you put together the documentation correctly to receive them. Now, always think about timing, because if you are qualified to be certified and you want to pursue this, well, if you put together an application to be certified as an 8A today and submit it, don't expect that you're going to get your certification next week or next month. You know, I don't know what the current timeline is based upon the backlog that the SBA has, but I have seen it sometimes take a year or more. Sometimes a business submits it at the right time when the SBA's workload isn't as bad, and they get it a little under a year. But these are not, my point is, these are not instantaneous certifications that when you submit your application next week, you're going to get a letter saying congratulations. It just doesn't work that way. Then the next 1-line paragraph is very important. This is telling you right up front that the government's going to award any future solicitation based upon your past performance and price. So they are going to call your references and contact them and find out about the quality of your work and timeliness and any other factors that they would like to ask questions about. And then, of course, price. And then, of course, they typically have this standard paragraph at the bottom that talks about this should not be construed as a request for a proposal or an offer. The information you provide is voluntary. You're not entitled to any payment based upon submitting this information. And that's pretty typical. Now, if they'd had a draft statement of work, which would have been helpful, it would have been attached here and you could download it, and then you could read specifically what you are expected to do. Now, this is a recompete of an existing contract. I remember when this was recompeted last time. And I will tell you that this is, you know, if you've ever been to downtown Dayton and been around the courthouse, well, there's not a tremendous amount of grass to cut in downtown Dayton. So it's going to be a lot of trimming, some edging. And oh, by the way, if I recall correctly, on the statement of work on this opportunity last time, you're also going to have to go inside the building and care for the live plants that are inside the building and around the judge's court chamber. And if you know anything at all about federal judges, they are typically very particular people who like things done a certain way and like things done by people who look professional. So if you were to receive this contract, I wouldn't recommend going into the judge's courthouse or into his chambers or into his courtroom looking like you've just been laying sod for 5 and 6 hours in July. You're going to want to have somebody who looks fairly professional and neat to do that part of the task. This tells you some contact information, and here you get to see the names, email addresses, and phone numbers of the contracting officer and contracting specialist that's handling this opportunity. So they give you a lot of information right here on this page. Now I'm going to stop sharing here and show you something else that I found. And I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm going to go sort of piggyback on Teresa McAluloy's excellent seminar that was done in a week or 10 days ago that she gave on capture management. This falls more into capture management. I found the current incumbent using a tool that we have called FedMine that PTAC, our PTAC has a subscription to. And the current incumbent doing this work is called the Lizard Palm Company. I didn't make up the name. That's just what they call themselves. They're located up in Huber Heights, Ohio, which is a suburb of Dayton, just north of the city. There's a lot of information here. There's the DUNS number for Lizard Palm. But most importantly, what this says, the contract requirement. This was landscaping at the Rice Federal Building parking lot and Archives Warehouse in Dayton. The total contract price is increased from over $100,000 to $126,990.60. And this contract action exercised option period 4. So basically this contract was for a 1-year base of performance and 4 one-year options, a total of 5 years. So once you can do some further research, or the government releases further information like a draft statement of work, you can look at it very quickly and say, you know, they want all this work done, and the last time they competed this, they were willing to pay almost $127,000. Now it'll be a little more this time due to inflation, but not much more. You know, could I make a reasonable profit doing this amount of work for 127,000? Or, you know, would I be better off spending my time doing some other work? And that's a decision that you can make up front. Decide, do I want to keep putting my time and effort in winning this contract, or do I just want to, you know, say no thank you and I'll go do something else? The other thing that's interesting down here is this record was created by a person with the last name Vackery. So knowing that and knowing who's handling it this time, there's different people. So there's a different probably contracting officer and different contracting specialists. So they may look at things a little differently than than this last person did. And I can almost bet you that this contract was awarded against a GSA schedule, which is a contract you get from GSA that says you will agree to provide products or provide specified services at negotiated prices. So if you don't have a GSA schedule and you're interested in this, it would probably behoove you to try to get one. Now, this last option runs through March 31st, 2022. If the government decides, after reviewing the sources sought notice and the responses, that we're going to set this aside for, let's say, a woman-owned small business that does landscaping, and oh, by the way, they have to have a GSA schedule, that means if you don't have a GSA schedule, too bad, so sad. But if you want to get a GSA schedule, and it is a lot of work to get a schedule, you have until March 31st of 2022 to receive the schedule. I'm not saying that's not doable, but it's tight as far as whether you can get it done in time. So keep this in mind as you're thinking about your planning and whether you want to put the resources required to try to win this. So now I'm going to go back to the slides. Okay. See if it'll move forward.
Bill, somebody is asking, how does somebody get a GSA schedule? And does the PTAC have any archive training on how to get a GSA schedule?
Number one, a GSA schedule is actually a proposal that you submit to the GSA to provide specified services or specified products at a defined price that you and the GSA negotiate. So That is how you get it. And you'll actually submit a proposal to the GSA to start the process. I believe that we have offered training in the past on this subject. I know a PTAC counselor can work with you on what you need to do to submit your proposal for that. And Jane Stewart, I know you're on, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you've done seminars in the past on that. And do you have a seminar coming up on this same topic?
I did a webinar recently, and the recording of that webinar is on the ptac.ohio.edu website.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent timing. Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
So hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions there, Shonda?
I think that's it for now. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Shane.
Well, let's talk about the sources sought notice. When it's published, it's a formal and likely the initial mass communication to industry, stating that the government is conducting market research about a need or a requirement that could result in a future solicitation. Now, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, known as the FAR, mandates that the government perform market research. And in market research, what the government's trying to find out is there interest within industry to provide this product or service? What are industry's capabilities? What's their experience? Now, landscaping services are somewhat common. So yes, you would think that there's plenty of sources out there. They have various capabilities, and that industry is going to be interested. Sometimes if it's a little more unique, it may be much more limited. Sometimes the government uses the sources sought notice for them to gain information on technologies. In this case, probably not. But most importantly, what government's looking for are what does small business have capability to perform this task and provide this service. They're also seeking industry's input. In your response to the sources sought, you notice we talked about what you had to provide to the government early on in this discussion. There's nothing that said, nothing that prohibited, that the government prohibited where you could say, we think you've forgotten something. When we do this work commercially, typically our customers also want this service, or make sure you address this requirement, or this, maybe there's been a new law or regulation that impacts you. Make sure you take this into consideration, government. So there's an opportunity for you to make input. And by making an input such as that is one way of impressing upon the government that, when we go back and look at what this company told us, they're right. These people actually know something about this subject a little more than we did. And your sources sought response is a significant input into the government's acquisition strategy. If the government is typically aware of 2 or more qualified small businesses, then they will normally set this aside for only small businesses to compete for. And if they don't want to do that, they have to have some very good reasons why, and they have to discuss it with the SBA as to why they don't want to restrict this to small business. And the SBA, in my previous experience, is pretty adamant about, no, we think you really ought to set this aside for small business. But guess what, folks? If you're small business and you don't make an input, then when the SBA wants to go argue that this ought to be set aside for small business, the government contracting officer says, well, we issued this source of sought notice, and guess what? We didn't hear from small business. So that kind of undercuts the SBA's argument. And you know, I hear many times, and you're right, from small business, that they can never talk to the contracting officer or the program manager or the program manager staff. You know, we can't get their attention. They won't listen to us. They won't talk to us about this opportunity, etc. And I understand. And in many cases, you're correct. Well, by submitting a quality response to the source of sought notice is your way, and maybe your only way, of communicating to the contracting officer and or the program manager and staff. So we've talked about this current open source of sought that just kind of recaps what I showed you on that other web page. We've talked about what you must submit when it's due. There's no restriction on the size of submission. You can put a lot of this on a separate piece of paper that you email to the contracting officer along with your capability statement. There's nothing that says you also can't submit a list of questions for the contracting officer for either suggestions for them for what should be in the final solicitation, or questions you've got about this opportunity that they didn't put in the source of sought notice. We also went over the fact that you had to submit your business size and any socioeconomic certifications you had. Now, if this had been a more complex requirement, say it was for IT services or supply chain services, or you pick your favorite requirement for your line of business, and there had been an attached performance work statement, the government would have probably given you more specificity in what information they wanted you to submit in your response. And they may even have had a list of questions for you to respond to. Well, as you're looking at this type of source of sought, take a look at that attachment, especially if it's a performance work statement, and assess your company's knowledge to perform all tasking paragraphs, all the paragraphs where the government says the contractor has to do something if this were an actual contract, along with your past performance. Now, there are expensive software tools that you can buy to help you do this, but an Excel spreadsheet works fine, where you just will list the text of the tasking paragraph on the left-hand side, and you'll have columns across the top. One section will talk about your company's knowledge. And either you have a lot of knowledge, you have some knowledge, or you have no knowledge about what this tasking paragraph means. And same thing whether you have past performance, whether it's commercial or federal or state or local government, that says, yep, we've done this specific work before. The work that's contained in this tasking paragraph we've done for another customer before, and we can cite who that is. So analyze the results once you get done. If you have little or no knowledge of a significant percentage of the tasking paragraphs or no past performance, put yourself in the government shoes. Would you make a good prime contractor? Do you know enough to write a proposal to describe how you would perform the work when you don't know anything about it or you don't have any past performance? Do you know enough even to write a credible response to the sources sought notice? Now, if your knowledge or past performance is only deficient, say in a few areas, well, this is where you can find a subcontractor to fill in the gaps. But concentrate your search on subcontractors that fill in the gaps. It won't do you any good to have a subcontractor on your team that can do the same 80% of the work that you can do, but they don't have any past performance or any knowledge any more than you do of the 20% that you don't.
Bill,
Yes.
we have a few questions. I think this
Okay.
is a good break.
Right.
One, is proprietary information or proprietary technologies, can somebody submit that with their RFI, and would it be protected? So is it recommended that they submit any proprietary information, processes, technologies with their RFI?
I would recommend that you not, but if you need to, I would contact the contracting officer in advance and discuss it with the contracting officer about how you should properly label it in your response to make sure that proprietary information, etc., is properly protected.
Okay, great, thank you. The next one, can you talk about any special circumstances, if any, to submitting a sources sought that apply to architectural and engineering A&E projects?
Yes, some special things for A&E projects. Typically, what the government in a lot of cases is going to be looking for is comparable past performance. Not only comparable past performance, but also your technical ability. So when I'm talking about comparable past performance, let's say that the government agency puts out a sources sought notice to replace the bridge, the I-75-71 bridge over in Cincinnati that goes over the river, the Brent Spence Bridge or whatever it's called. Well, they're going to want to see responses from companies that have done work of that kind of size before and complexity. So, you know, if all you've ever done is built a bridge to bridge a drainage ditch over somebody's a residential driveway, well, don't submit that and, tell me that, you're fully qualified and whatnot and have the experience and past performance based upon that kind of past performance to do the architecture and engineering required to replace the Brent Spence Bridge. Also, in an A&E situation, you would probably want to tell them about the technical qualifications of your staff. As far as their degrees, their certifications, and make it relevant to the particular project. And you're probably going to want to cover all. I'm not an architecture and engineering expert, but you're probably going to want to have people, who can have the qualifications to do the design. Maybe either somebody else on your company has the qualifications from the environmental aspects, or you have a subcontractor that's going to be on your team that can do the environmental work. That's all that's required. Not only the analysis and the engineering, but all the permitting, etc. So that's where I would lean to in terms of A&E work. But like I said, I'm not an architect and I'm not an engineer, so there could be other aspects that you'd want to stress in your response.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody's asking, do you have a visual example of a PWS, a performance work statement? And while you were answering that, I just went out and Googled and found a generic example, and I emailed it to you. So if you don't have one, if you want to pull up the one I just emailed you.
Oh, bless you. I appreciate it. And you could also go into Beta SAM and just look for actual solicitations and pull one of those up, and there'll be a PWS associated with probably the solicitation.
Okay.
So thank you for doing that, Shonda.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions?
No, and for those, if somebody wants that example, if you put in your email, I'll email that to you, that example, so that Bill can keep going. I think Dr. Gail Goldman and Shannon Phoenix, anybody else, if you wanted that PWS example, put in your email in the chat and I'll send that to you now. That's it, Bill, thanks.
Okay. Well, the next topic I was going to dive into was your past performance. If you haven't already, build what I call a repository of your past performances, because you're going to use some of them for every opportunity you pursue, whether it's a sources sought notice response or the actual solicitation. And once you have the information documented, you'll have what I call draft ready material for these sources sought responses and or proposals. Don't skimp on the details. Be very complete, because what seems to be an obscure detail today could be critical in the future. And in your repository, for each one of your past performances, have it as its own file. Just have basic information: who you did the work for, if there was a contract number, the dates of performance, the amount of money that you were paid for this work. I think I mentioned the dates of performance, and a point of contact with that company or government agency, name, phone number, email address, so that if the government wanted to call and get a reference, they could get it. And then at the bottom, have a detailed description of the work that you performed. You know, just don't say landscape, you know, front yard of business. You know, actually say, you know, amended the soil, added topsoil, laid sod for X number of feet of business, came back on a weekly basis to check on it and water as needed and fertilize. And then, you know, 4 weeks later began mowing. So you'll have information there. So if the government has specific tasks in their statement of work that you're responding to, they can read the past performance and say, oh yeah, you know, they actually, when we want somebody to put the grass in, they've prepared the soil, they've fertilized, they laid the sod, they've taken care of it, they've watered it, they've maintained it, they've cut the grass, rather than just a simple statement of, you know, put the front yard in. And they can actually see the magnitude, you know, how many square feet of sod or how big was the area that you were responsible for cutting the grass. So the detail really counts, because what you want is, after the government reads your past performance, they want to say, you know, the work that we've got in this performance work statement, not only have they told us, and we're going down the stream here, down to submitting a proposal. Not only have they told us how they're going to do it, we can see in the past performance that they have done the entire process. And we have called that customer, and that customer was very happy with them. And that customer says if they had a choice, they would hire this company again. Because believe me, when I would be working on or actually running a source selection and deciding who was going to win the contract, I would always have my staff ask the, if I was checking past performances, ask the customer, if given a choice, would you hire this company again? And unless I got an immediate yes, if I got kind of a him and hawing on the phone, or a long roundabout answer or no answer, my radar started going up, and we would start digging and looking for reasons why. And the same thing, although source selections are not evaluated, sources sought notices are not evaluated, it can be an early indicator of whether this is a company that maybe has had issues in the past. So if you decide, you know, you've analyzed the results of your Excel spreadsheet and say, you know, I just don't know enough about several areas, or I don't have any past performance. You know, I don't think I could be a great prime contractor. But I do have a lot of knowledge in several areas of the attached draft statement of work they gave me, and I've got past performance to back it up. I could be a good subcontractor. Well, keep that matrix that you filled out, and then you can start trying to look for and contact possible prime contractors. and let them know about your capabilities, your relevant past performance. If you've had any interaction with the contracting officer or program manager or the program manager staff, if you have any pertinent certifications, ISO or other industry recognized standards. Now, a big one that's really it's starting to get more and more important, start really getting foot stomped. If you've gone out and gotten your cybersecurity certification and you are now compliant at some level in the CMMC, that's something that you need to, I would even include it on your capability statement. If you have any socioeconomic certifications, if you have any detailed discussions with companies about teaming, hopefully they have asked you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. But if not, I would only have those discussions under a non-disclosure agreement so that your information is protected. And most importantly, join a team that you think will win. Just don't join any team. And typically when you have these meetings, the prime contractor will do a lot of the talking and they'll be asking you questions. And then at the end, they'll ask you if you have any. Well, a good question to always ask them is, well, tell me why you think you're going to win. And if the potential prime contractor doesn't come back with a crisp answer that they already have ready and whatnot, well, that should give you pause. And you may want to think about whether these people are really serious about this, or are they just, like the Miami Valley casino commercials, hoping to get lucky. And companies in this business that are hoping to get lucky generally don't win any business. So you've submitted your response to the sources sought notice. Kind of give the government about 10 days to review the response. And then after that, kind of call or email the contracting officer and seek some feedback on your submission. And yeah, you may have to be a little persistent because you probably won't get them the first time. You may have to try at different times. You may have to try multiple times. But, some typical questions you can ask. Do they have any questions or do they need any clarifications? Could they contact my past performance references? Is there an opportunity for me to come in and meet with you? And if there's a program manager, to discuss your submission and where the government's going with this process, and what's the timeline for any potential release of a request for quote or request for proposal. And if there's no decision, is there a timeline to make a decision, and when are we going to know we're going to move forward? So you can start planning that well, it looks like they're going to release the solicitation maybe in August. So maybe around August, I need to make sure I have some time available to write a proposal. And if you talk to the contracting officer and you're not getting really much feedback from them, you can always ask them, well, how could I have done better? And use it as a learning exercise. And generally the contracting officers, most of them will give you some feedback. And like I said, you need to be politely persistent. But also remember, these people are busy too, and they are typically handling more than one acquisition at a time. So if you do get them on the phone, be organized and ready to go and know what you want to ask them, because they aren't going to want to sit there on the phone and have a 20-30 minute chit chat.
Bill, we have another question.
Yes. All right.
If someone responded to a solicited thought, and the contracting officer, the acquisition team did decide to set it aside, what questions could they ask toward the next step?
Well, hopefully it's set aside for the socioeconomic category or certification that this company has. So assuming that's the case, I would ask about the timeline. You could always ask if a draft PWS was not issued with the sources sought. You know, you can ask them, are you going to release a draft performance work state for industry to review and industry to comment on? Or you could say, and like in the case of this Dayton landscaping one, you know, I've gone out and gotten the previous solicitation. Do you contemplate that the work in this new solicitation is going to be very similar to what was in the previous solicitation? So you could ask questions along those lines, and then see what the contracting officer will tell you. Because if the upcoming solicitation, if the work in it is very similar to what was in the last one, and you know what the awarded price is of the last one, that kind of gives you an idea of, okay, I know what price I'm going to have to submit to win, and you can make a decision, you know, it's just not worth it to me to do it for this price, or I couldn't make any money if I had to do it at this price, or, you know, this seems to be a pretty good deal. I ought to keep pursuing it. So those are some of the questions that you can ask the contracting officer, and you should be asking yourself. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Okay. So how does the government react when they get your response? Well, they're looking at the submission. They're looking for some key facts. Does your company appear to be credible? Do you know what you're talking about? Did you tell me something I didn't know, or something that catches my interest? Have you done similar work before to what we're seeking? And if you did, who can I call to see if they were happy with your work? And if you're a small business, what socioeconomic certifications do you have? And for example, if I'm thinking about using a GSA schedule to do the contracting for this, you know, do you have a GSA schedule, or have you told me you think you're going to have one? And if so, by what date do you think you're going to have one? And lastly, you know, I would ask my team, is there something in some of these responses where there's some companies that we should keep a watch on and watch them in the future to see if they win future contracts before we release our RFP. Should we put a company on our radar to watch in the future? Because typically what happens when we would get a sources sought response, and let's say we would get 25 responses, there would probably be about 4 or 5, maybe sometimes as high as 10 from companies that really didn't know much about what we were doing or what we wanted to do. And I kind of put them in a pile of, we're just happy to be here and happy to be alive, and, you know, throw us a lifeline and drag us along. And those kind of figuratively went into the ignore pile. So then maybe that left 15. And then out of that 15, there might be 10 to 12 that just kind of gave me responses. Yeah, you know something about this. Yeah, you've got past performance. But when I read your response, you know, I either kept yawning, or I kept looking out the window, or, you know, I was reading it saying, you know, when is this over? When's this going to be done? So it didn't impress me. And then there were 2 or 3 companies where I would, out of that 25, where I would read them and say, gee, this company's done some interesting things. You know, they've given us some suggestions that I haven't thought about, my team hadn't thought about. Maybe we ought to call these couple companies in to talk to us and get to know them better. And so we can start finding out who's on their team. And so we can start watching them a little more closely. And that's kind of how the government roughly looks at these sources sought responses. There might be some good inputs in there for the statement of work, for the eventual solicitation. There could be some other good suggestions in there. And oh, by the way, you know, out of these 25, we only got 4 from small business. So not a large small business response. Maybe we should be thinking that this should really go full and open. Or 20 or 25 of them came from small business. And out of those 20, you know, 15 or 18 of them, they look qualified. So yeah, looks like we probably ought to set this aside for small business. And then we'll look at these 15 or 18 and look at them further and see if they kind of fall within a particular socioeconomic category. And then maybe we ought to set it aside for that category. And then decide, how do we want to do the contracting? Do we want to create a new contract? Excuse me. We want to use an existing contract vehicle like a GSA schedule, etc. So your response to the sources sought, or lack of it, really can impact the decisions the government makes on how they're going to compete an upcoming opportunity. They don't hear from you, you don't get a voice at the table. So kind of to summarize all this, remember, your response represents your company. If it's a poor quality response, well, they're gonna get an impression of your company. Your First impression you make can be very positive or it can be devastating. Do you know enough about the topic to write an interesting response if one's required that's going to generate interest from the government? Look past the sources sought response and look at the bigger picture. Excuse me. Assess your ability in the future to write a compliant proposal. You know, do you have the writing skills on your team or the subject matter good enough to write even a small proposal, let alone one that's 50 or 100 pages? Do you currently have the past performance? Or can you obtain it from new customers you're going to receive prior to when the solicitation comes out? You have to submit the proposal. Do you have the resources that you can free up to write the proposal? Kind of the bottom line is, are you competitive, or can you become competitive in time for the RFP release? And that goes whether you're a prime or want to be a subcontractor. So with that, Shonda, I'll be ready to take follow-on questions. Note that I have my phone number right on this slide, so 1 out of 2. It happens. So Shonda, back over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Bill. That was a lot of great information that you provided. And with that said, I know we've already generated some questions at different points beyond that. Are there any additional questions that you may have, anybody has? We still have, looks like 36 minutes, so we have plenty of time. Is there any additional information anybody wanted or specific questions? Go ahead and type those in the chat. I think it's, and hopefully everybody's taking notes. If you didn't, one great thing about these sessions is they are being recorded, so you can always go back. I think it's always a great thing when I'm so glad Bill used an example, a real live example, so that you can see of a source of salt that actually is out there now, and just giving you some of his tips and pointers as far as some of the things that you should do. Somebody's just saying thank you. No other questions? Well, maybe if somebody is typing something or they're thinking of something. Again, thank you so much, Bill. I'll just let everybody know that next week on the 20th, next Thursday, we're going to focus on, today we were focusing on sources sought, kind of what agencies are kind of doing before they prepare for solicitation. But when they actually put out something, an RFP or an RFQ, request for proposal or request for quote, how do you respond to those? So next week, we'll be focusing on that. And then on the following week, the last Thursday, May 27th, the focus will be on, the topic is, now that I have my contract, now that I've got my contract, now what? And so on post-award considerations. And so we will have another PTAC counselor, and actually we will have someone from an agency, DFAS, to kind of go over the post-award considerations, some of the things you need to do to make sure you get paid, and different things like that once you actually win your contract. So while I was talking, it looks like we do have some questions that have come through. Okay, someone is saying they actually wrote a book about their business, whatever that business may be. Could they send that as part of their information to the government, Bill?
You can. There's no guarantee they're going to crack the cover, though.
Okay. So
Um,
maybe with that, Bill, would you say if they did send their book, maybe they want to reference if there was something specific that they were referring to in the book as it relates to their response? Maybe they want to put that in their response, reference the page number, and not just sending the book alone on in and of itself, especially if there's a nice amount of pages.
That's an excellent suggestion, Shonda. Or if they have a synopsis of their book, or maybe if somebody's written an excellent review of the book,
Okay, that's a
you
great.
might send that and then say, you know, if you'd like a copy of the book, would be happy to follow up and send you a copy.
Okay.
But just don't send them the book and say, you know, request you read this, because without any context, because
Right.
more than likely they probably won't take the time to read it.
Yeah, and it's not that they're just really busy. How can somebody find, this is great, because this is another reason why people should, if they have not utilized PTAC services, but how could someone find out who got the previous contract, who's the current incumbent, previous contract holder, so that maybe if they were looking to find some companies that could subcontract for them. So how could somebody find a previous contract? Who were the previous contract holders? Who were the previous people that won that particular contract? What tools could they use?
You can either find it, you can find it yourself in either the Federal Procurement Data System or usaspending.gov, or it would be an excellent topic to discuss with your PTAC counselor to help, so they could help do the research to find that information for you.
Yes, great opportunity for you to connect with your PTAC counselor, and they can look up that information and help you find it, as Bill said, on FPDS or whatnot. So again, if you want the link to this video for today, Jane has just provided the link for you to go to, and I believe Sharon had typed it in where you can go on PTAC's website. I believe it may take a few days for this to be posted, so this should be posted sometime next week, but all of the ones for capture management from April, as well as many different other wonderful presentations on the GSA schedule, on how to navigate SAM. There were some recent updates on SAM, so you can find all of those great videos on the PTAC's website. Here's another question. Since my company provides goods rather than services, is my best shot, should they go after a GSA schedule?
What I always tell clients is, before you spend the time and money to get a GSA schedule, is talk to some of your prospective or current customers in the federal government, and ask them, you know, if I had a GSA schedule, would that help you do business with me? Would you be more inclined to do business with me? And if they say, well, yeah, you know, that could be very helpful, well, then maybe it's worth your time and effort to get a schedule, because also GSA will have expectations for how much money that will flow through your schedule once it's awarded. But if the contracting officer tells you, well, no, we don't use GSA schedules in our agency, we have our own contract vehicles, or we do it some other way, then getting a GSA schedule may not be the best use of your time or your money. If you hire somebody to help you put your schedule together. And there are companies out there that will do that. So that's
Okay,
how
good.
I'd answer that question.
And then also, Bill, that could be another great point that somebody could discuss with their PTAC counselor, is to kind of look not specifically at particular sources sought requests and said, hey, should I get a GSA schedule, but looking at their entire business and saying,
Correct.
is this a good way for me to go after government contracts? And the PTAC counselor can help you kind of explore if that's a good fit for your business, for your industry, and they have some other tools that they can help. Next question, are there any other ways to focus on solicitations for goods? Not quite.
Depending upon what you sell, yes, a lot of times the military will buy goods and material, and you'll find that the Defense Logistics Agency is the wholesaler for the military services. And so they will sell items using their own in-house called the DLA Internet Bid Board System, known as DIBS. And through DIBS, they will advertise solicitations, and you can submit your responses through DIBS. And if you want to learn how to use DIBS, DLA does have some seminars that they have previously recorded. They also do some face-to-face training classes a couple times a year, although they fill up quickly. But it's also an excellent subject. You can meet with your PTAC counselor to provide you some more information about DIBS.
Yes. Okay, thank you. We have a ton of questions. They keep coming in, but these are really good. And that training that Bill referred to with DLA, it's the TKO, Training, Knowledge, and Opportunities. So you can Google TKO at DLA, and they should come up with a schedule for that. Next question, is there a limit to the number of pages or length of the responses to a RFI or a sources sought?
Look at the government announcement and they will tell you if there's a limit. The one we cited today had no limit, but they wanted very, very little information from the companies. So it just depends. And sometimes you'll see, we want no more than 10 pages. And believe me, if they only want 10 pages, they're going to stop reading after 10 pages.
Right. Right. And would you say, Bill, if they provided more than 10 pages, then they would consider you not responsive, but
I don't know if they would consider you non-responsive just because it's not on a sources sought notice, it's not an evaluation, but the government just has the option of stop reading after 10 pages.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. Next question. This one is a little lengthy. I get PTAC notices that include notices for contracts that are only for organizations in a specific republic, KYR, GYZ republic. Since I am a cross-cultural strategist, how do these overseas organizations apply? Through the US Embassy? Do they not have the certifications that a US business has?
When you're talking about foreign acquisition.
This is not about foreign acquisition. This is a question that because in my specifications, I have cross-cultural strategist and Kyrgyz Republic as specialties. So now I'm getting notices for Kyrgyz Republic country people to apply to our government, but it won't allow a US business like me to do it because there are calls for proposals from on-site companies.
Who is the, who is
It's a
it coming?
PTAC
Is it,
notice that says we're upgrading this. I forward it to people I know in that country, but how would they ever apply for it anyway if it's from our government?
is it coming from, so the email you're receiving is coming from somebody in the US government?
Yes, it's being generated through PTAC. It's an like a, what do they call it? When, they change something on the proposal. And
Okay, a modification, yeah.
a modification has happened. I get the notice because I'm flagged because those are in my tag words. And then, but it says, but only the organizations in that country can apply. I'm a US business. It's
Yeah.
nothing to do with me.
Well,
Maybe I'll have to talk to someone else. I don't know. It's complex.
well, they have, they have obviously restricted the acquisition to companies, and they have limited competition
My,
to companies that are in country.
my.
And so,
Maybe they're telling me that if I want to be a consultant for that company in that country company has to make the application. Just like when I was on a US speaker grant. It
correct,
had to be generated from that foreign country to bring me into the picture. Maybe
Correct.
that's what it is. Okay, thank you.
uh-huh.
Great question. Thank you for unmuting your mic and asking that. Next question. How can I get my business designated as a small business?
There is no certification for small business,
Mhm.
but what you generally do for just regular small business, you look at your revenue and you compare it against the standards that are in the North American Industrial Classification System. And if your revenue or employee size, depending upon the standard that the NAICS code, that particular NAICS code uses, if you fall underneath it, then you are a small business. And your PTAC counselor and or the SBA can provide you some guidance and help in that regard.
Yes. And to add to that, what Bill said, the SBA has something called a size standards chart. So you can Google SBA size standards chart. And then depending on your industry, as he said, typically industries that are service-based, they will determine if you're small or not based upon your revenue. So there's a cap for, let's just say construction. The cap for small business is like 36 million. And so if you are in a manufacturing type of industry, typically those industries are based on the number of employees. And so it will tell you, it could be 500, it could be 1,000. But then when you go to register in sam.gov, you have to put in whatever your NAICS code, North American Industry Classification System, and it will, and once you register in SAM, if you are small based on that size standard, then your information will go into the SBA's dynamic small business search automatically if you opt to make it public. So again, as Bill said, there is no certification, but if you are small, it will show up in the SBA's dynamic small business search, and contracting officers can find you in there. And you can work with your PTAC on that. Next question, if I want to add more NAICS codes to my profile, do I just do this in SAM?
If you want to add more NAICS codes, well, first of all, when you add NAICS codes in SAM, make sure that you have can document that you've had experience performing the work that's contained in those NAICS codes. But you would add them in SAM, and then I would also update your capability statement.
Great.
And then if you use the bid match services that I talked about in the very, very beginning, when I talked about PTAC services, you also might want to update your bid match to include those NAICS codes in what the bid match was looking for you.
Great. Great advice, Bill. A lot of times companies do add those NAICS codes to their SAM record, but they don't update their capability statement and they don't update their bid match. So great information. I believe that's it. Great questions today. I thought I was going to have a little bit more time. I'm almost finished with the PWS. I'll email those to you a little bit after we get off of here, so I haven't forgotten about that. I think that's it for today. I don't see any other questions. Great questions. Again, this is being recorded, so you can go back and find this. It'll be posted next week in the PTAC archives under the resources and tools link of the PTAC's website. And then please join us next Thursday, the 20th, for how to respond to an RFP and an RFQ. And the following Thursday, the 27th, I got my contract now what? Post-award considerations. So Bill, are you okay with everybody receiving your slides?
Yes, let me update it with that one change with the phone number, and then I'll send you an updated slide deck.
Okay. All right, if you send that out, if you send it, Bill, if you want to update that quickly, I'll send it out because I'm sending out these PWS's examples, so I can just send it out.
Well, I'll send it to you in the probably next 20 minutes.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay, and I said next Thursday, the 20th, then the 27th, how I got my contract now what? Post-award considerations. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time today. These are always great, very informative. Bill, everybody's saying thank you very much. Great detail, a lot of great clarity. Thank you so much. We have a lot of the PTAC counselors that are on here, the PTAC, OU PTAC director. So again, thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Looks like it's wonderful weather out. The sun is shining outside. So enjoy the rest of your week, enjoy your weekend, and hopefully you will join us next Thursday. All right, have a great day, everybody. Thank you again.